A very warm welcome to the new episode of Incan Insights. This is your host, Sumit Sharma Samir. This platform invites global thought leaders and also promotes Nepali changemakers of diverse field. So please subscribe to the channel. This week, my guest is a noted former Indian diplomat and a globally known author, Mr. Vikas Swarup. During his illustrious diplomatic career, Mr. Swarup served in the key position across various countries, including the United States, South Africa, and Japan, and as the official spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs of India. He is best known for his debut novel, Q&A, which inspired the Oscar-winning film Slumdog Millionaire. His other novels include Six Suspects, The Accidental Apprentice, and The Girl with the Seven Lives. His writing, marked by compelling storytelling and profound social insights, has earned him international recognition, cementing his legacy as a master storyteller and a representative of India's literary brilliance on the global stage. In today's episode, we'll delve into his literary works. Mr. Swarup, welcome to the Ink and Insights with Sumit Sharma Shamir.
Thank you so much, Sumit. It's a pleasure to be on your show, and my very warm greetings to all your listeners and all your viewers.
Thank you so much. Mr. Swarup, you led an illustrious career both in diplomacy and as an author. It must have been extremely challenging. How did you manage both?
Well, primarily, I considered myself a diplomat. I was a diplomat for 35 years. And writing is something that happened along the way. You know, I started writing only when I was more than 40 years old. And this was only when my posting in London between 2000 and 2003. So I still call myself a diplomat who writes. You know, not a writer masquerading as a diplomat. Of course, now I am a retired diplomat, so now I can call myself a full-time writer. But basically, for me, the trick was to keep the two aspects compartmentalized. Like when I'm doing my work, I'm doing my work. I'm not thinking about any books or anything like that. And I used to really create in my spare time. So I really called myself a weekend writer because, you know, weekends was the only time when you had free time to yourself. And I'm one of those writers who cannot write if you have a deadline pressure, you know, in terms of an official engagement that you have to do, an official report that you have to submit. I can write only when my mind is at total peace and quiet. And that was only possible on weekends, which were my own. And that's why, I really started writing over the weekends. In fact, my first book, Q&A, which, as you know, became Slumdog Millionaire, was written over maybe, 12 weekends in London in 2.5 months.
Yeah, that's pretty fast, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and as a diplomat, you must have gathered, different worldview. Do you feel that has been reflected in your work as well?
Not really, in the sense that many people say that if I had mined my diplomatic experiences into a novel, then it would probably have been a spy caper starting off in Johannesburg, ending up in New York or, Tokyo or someplace like that. But for me, the inspiration has always come from everyday life in India. And that's why all 4 of my novels are set entirely in India with Indian characters and dealing with the Indian reality. So I would say, yes, some of the conversations I've had, because you see, no writer writes in a vacuum. So some of the conversations you have had, some of the things that you have experienced, indirectly they filter into your writing. But directly, it does not reference any of my postings or any of my, any part of my career as a diplomat.
True. Let's talk about your recent book about the girl with the 7 lives. How were you inspired to write this novel, and how did the idea evolve into the story it is today?
Yes, so the inspiration for this one really came from the women of India, because I always feel, in fact, what I'm saying about the women of India could probably also apply to the women of Nepal, the women of Sri Lanka, Maldives, I think all across South Asia. I feel that women are not just the caregivers. They are also, in a way, the engines of society. They are the ones that keep society going, and they have not really got their due. We still think of themselves primarily as working in the home and looking after the family. But in many places, if you look at it, it is women who are really the bread earners also. In agriculture, for instance, it is women who are doing most of the work. So I really was inspired by the women of India. And this was, of course, also the modern Indian woman. The modern Indian woman who's no longer burdened by the shackles of the past, who has broken out of those shackles and is creating an independent life for herself. So that was the real inspiration. And that's how I read the story of this girl with the 7 lives. The idea was to show a very cross-cultural kind of a story, which takes you across the terrain of India. So it starts off in Delhi, goes off to Punjab. From there, you move to Kerala. From Kerala, you come to Goa. From Goa, you come to Mumbai. Because you see,
Right.
India is such a complex country that only
True.
through a multi-layered, multi-dimensional narrative can you scratch at some of the reality of India than you would get from a very unidimensional single narrative. If you set it in a,
Exactly.
let's say, in a middle-class housing society in Delhi, it would give you a very, very limited view of India.
Right, right. And the title itself is intriguing. What does Seven Lives symbolize in the context of the novel?
Yes. So basically, the two main aspects, the two main themes of this novel, I would say, are resilience and reinvention. So
Right.
the seven lives really they are not reincarnations as such, because technically speaking, reincarnation happens after you die. But they are
Right.
reinventions because, every 3 years or so, has to reinvent herself because of the kind of circumstances she finds herself in. Many times the police are after her also. Because you see,
Okay.
the heroine of this novel is a morally grey character. She is not
Okay.
somebody that you would say is 100% goody good. She is a
Right.
morally grey character, but she has a strong sense of justice. And for me, the challenge was that even though I'm creating a slightly morally grey character, I still want the reader to root for her. So the seven
Right.
lives really refer to her seven reinventions. Every time
Okay.
she's reinventing herself, she's moving to a new geography and even adopting a totally new identity. And that's why her name
Interesting.
also changes on each of the seven identities. She
Oh,
starts off
wow.
as Devi, and then she becomes Deepa. From Deepa, she becomes Diba, which, as you know, is a Muslim name. From Diba, she becomes Dasmeet, which is a Punjabi name. From Dasmeet,
Okay.
she becomes Deepthi, which is a Keralite name. From Deepthi, she
Okay.
becomes Diana, which is a Christian name, a nurse in Goa. And then finally, she becomes Dolly. And Dolly, as you know, is an all-encompassing name. Dolly could be a Hindu, a Muslim, a Sikh, a Christian, anyone. She could be a Nepali, she could be a Indian, she could be a Sri Lankan. Dolly is
Right.
universal.
Right. I found it very interesting. All the names starts from the D.
D, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Does it mean
No,
anything?
I experimented, for instance, if, for instance, her names were at one time she is Sunaina, at another time she is Rita, a third time she is Deepthi, to me, it would not have had that kind of an impact
Okay.
when the
Right.
alliteration of D comes in.
Right.
And that's why, for me, I think the D word was good because, it gives her a consistent identity, so to speak, even though it's a reinvention, but there is a common thread that it starts with the D.
Okay. And what were the most challenging aspects of developing the protagonist in the Girl with the Seven Lives?
Well, the first and foremost challenge was, as a male writer, how can I do a female protagonist? Because
True.
sometimes you can be caught out very quickly if you have not really researched your character very well. Because
Yeah.
women writers do male characters all the time, but very few male authors do female characters. So that was the first challenge: that can I do an authentic representation of the viewpoint of a woman? Can I look at the world from a woman's eyes? That was the
Right.
first challenge. The second challenge was, again, I'm looking at the world of a disadvantaged person, somebody who was born in a slum and has clawed her way up from there. So again, I'm coming from a relatively much more privileged background. Can I again look at the world through the eyes of a disadvantaged person and see what it feels like? So that was the
Right.
second challenge. And the third challenge, which I have already mentioned to you, was that I'm creating a morally gray character, somebody who's not averse to even murder. And yet, can I get the reader to root for her, even though she has done some questionable things? So these were the three main challenges, of course. And then the final challenge, which is present in all of my books, is I have to do very meticulous research because I'm writing about things that I do not have personal knowledge of. I'm
Right.
writing about a godman's ashram. I'm writing about a fake degree racket. I'm writing about neurosurgery. I have no knowledge about these things. So I had to ensure that I research these subjects adequately enough so that when the reader reads it, he does not feel that this is not an authentic portrayal of a godman's ashram or of a hospital or of a juvenile home.
Right. Right. Mr. Swarup, I think a lot of your novel explores complex social issues. Which of these that you have written do you hope will resonate most with readers?
I mean, India, of course, abounds in social issues because, as I said, we are such a complex country and there are so many levels of stratifications also, apart from the class and gender, you also have caste, and
Yeah.
that contributes to a lot of complexity. So for me, what I try to do is in each of my novels, I try to explore a different social strata. So in the
Okay.
first book, as you know, Q&A, it was the world of the underclass. And
Yeah.
that's why Slumdog Millionaire. In the second book, it was six different people looking at India from six different eyes. four insiders and
Wow.
two outsiders. The two outsiders being one from the Andaman Islands who still hunt with bows and arrows, and one
Right.
American who comes to India in search
Oh.
of a way out of life. In the third novel, The Accidental Apprentice, this is the world of, I would say, the middle class. It's about a
Right.
23-year-old sales girl who's suddenly given the offer to become the CEO of a $10 billion company, and how her life changes as a result of that. So for this novel, and don't forget, Sumit, this novel was coming after a gap of 11 years because I was so
Wow.
busy in my job as a diplomat. I was the official
Right.
spokesman, then I became High Commissioner to Canada. Then I was brought back as Secretary West in the Ministry of External Affairs. Then we had the
Yeah.
pandemic. So, I was so caught up in all these things that I just did not have the space and time to write something. So that is why the
Right.
gap between that novel and this novel became quite a long one, 11 years. But then finally, when I decided to write this, I wanted in a way to return to the world of Slumdog Millionaire, the world of the underclass, but with a different protagonist. Slumdog Millionaire had a male protagonist called Ram Muhammad Thomas. This one, I wanted to create a world through the eyes of a female protagonist called Devi, and then follow her journey. So that's how this novel came about.
Yeah. And what role do you think, the girl with the seven lives will play in shaping public discourse on social issues in India?
So
Or
a lot of social issues are explored in this book also. I think the first and foremost, of course, it explores the world of the slums, the kind of sewage, non-existent sewage, and the prevalence of disease, etc. That is there. That is one. Then I think a very important issue is tackled of observation homes for girls, because you see these observation homes are supposed to be halfway houses. Observation home
right.
is not a jail. So observation home is supposed to be an interim place where you're supposed to reside till your case is decided. And the
Exactly.
case, if your conviction is set aside, then of course you are freed. And if you are convicted, then you are sent to a proper juvenile home. So observation
Right.
home is a halfway house, and the inmates are supposed to stay not more than 5 or 6 months till their court
Oh,
cases are decided. But eventually, what happens is inmates end up staying in those observation homes for years and years because their court cases just take too much time. The lawyers are all appointed, the government appointed people who have no real interest in representing them. So in a
okay.
way, I have shown a light on this lacuna in the criminal justice system, on the juvenile justice system rather, because at one point Devi says that we are like pieces of unclaimed baggage which have been left
Oh,
behind. Nobody is picking up those baggages, and we are just concerned.
powerful statement.
Yes, exactly. Then we talk about what happens in a godman's ashram, especially a fake godman's ashram. How they exploit
True.
people. How they exploit their devotees. What goes on, behind the scenes in a godman's ashram. Then we explore the world of the fake degree racket, and I'm sure that's a problem in Nepal as well, because a lot
Yeah.
of people want to migrate abroad, and to
Yeah.
migrate abroad, you need to have very good grades, which you may not have. And then you approach the fake degree racket guys to create a fake degree for you, on the basis of which you can show good testimonials and get a better job. But eventually you might get
Exactly.
exposed also. And then I explored the world of the private hospitals.
Yeah.
What kinds of things happen in a private hospitals, how patients are fleeced and gouged in terms of, getting unnecessary tests done and things like that. So a number of social issues are touched upon. Finally, I talk about the world of online dating, what
Okay.
the perils and pitfalls of online dating also, because sometimes a
Exactly.
lot of scams happen. In India right now, a lot of digital arrest scams are going on, where, somebody calls you and says a package has been found which had drugs, and now you pay up, otherwise, you will go to jail and things like that. And even the Prime
Right.
Minister has had to warn people not to fall prey to these, scamsters who just call you out of the blue and say that you
Right.
have been arrested digitally.
Yeah, true. That's happening in Nepal as well. A lot of fake businesses, all sending a lot of options saying that we'll sell you this and that product, but they vanish after taking the money. So it's happening.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So how has the reception of this novel differed internationally compared to your previous works?
Well, the first thing is, so far, this novel has not had an international publication yet. It has only been published in the Indian subcontinent, which means it's available in India, it's available in Nepal, Sri Lanka, but it's not available across the world. And
Yeah.
yet, I was very gratified that just yesterday, this novel has been nominated for the Dublin Literary Award,
Oh, wow.
which is an international,
Congratulations for that.
yes, which is set up by the city of Dublin. And in
Right.
this award, 83 libraries from 34 countries they decide which are the best books of the year, and then they basically put forward those books for the long list. So my book has just been longlisted for this. So I was very, very gratified, because considering the book has not had an international publication, to be longlisted for an international, very prestigious international award was very good.
Right.
And in India, of course, also it has just been nominated, longlisted for the Kalinga Literary Award, which you are familiar with, since your own novel was awarded that particular one. So I think the reception has been good. It has been in the bestseller lists also, and generally, people have appreciated this new novel. Of course, it has come after a long gap of 11 years, so readers were, in a sense, waiting for a new novel from me. And I'm happy that I have been able to contribute to, the literary output and get readers interested in, in creating my world of social thrillers once again.
तिमीसँग अब धेरै टाइम छैन है, बिहे गर्नु छ भने गरिहाल, नत्र घरबाट मलाई अन्तै बिहे गर्दिनु।
भर्खर 3 वर्ष भयो एमबीबीएस जोइन गरेको, 5 वर्षको कोर्स हो। के भो? अचम्म छ। एक्सक्यूज मी सर मेरो 5 वर्षको कोर्स 3 वर्षमा सकाउन मिल्दैन?
गेट आउट।
हेलो,
के सोच्यौ त?
के सोच्ने? मैले प्रिन्सिपलसँग पनि कुरा गरिसके। 3 वर्षमा पनि के हुन्छ? के हुन्छ 3 वर्षमा?
के भयो भाइ? ल बस। साउजी, एक कप चिया। कसले भन्यो 3 वर्षमा के हुँदैन भनेर? यो हेर, एलआईसी नेपालको धनवृष्टि योजनामा 3 वर्षमा पैसा फिर्ता हुन्छ।
ए हो र?
जीवन बीमाको साथमा धनवृष्टि 3 वर्षमा एलआईसी नेपालको धनवृष्टि योजना। एलआईसी नेपाल।
Right. The novel will be soon on my shelf as well. And, I was wondering, your novel often have cinematic qualities. Do you envision your stories as films while writing them?
No, when I'm writing, I'm not thinking about the film at all, because I have written a book, and it is entirely up to the filmmakers whether that book has enough potential to become a web series or a film. When I write only a book. But I think, most directors who have sort of turned my books into films have told me that I have a very visual imagination, that I write in a very visual kind of way. And that is why I suppose it is easier to translate my books into celluloid, because the first book, as you know, became Slumdog Millionaire. The second book, Six Suspects, became a web series called The Great Indian Murder on Disney Hotstar. The third novel, The Accidental Apprentice, has also been optioned for a film. And as we speak, they have developed the script, and they are now looking for a top actress to play the role. And for the latest novel also, there is a lot of interest. So the interesting thing is, even though the book has not been published abroad, it's only been published in India, but I have already got interest from a producer in Hollywood. I have got an interest from a producer in London. I have got interest from a producer in South Africa. So perhaps, the craze of Slumdog Millionaire is still continuing. And people are still...
Because we wish you good luck for that, and we wish you that we'll watch your movie soon in Netflix somewhere.
I hope so. Let's see what the destiny holds for this, book, whether it becomes a Netflix series or it becomes a film. That's entirely, up to the filmmakers. But I would be happy to see this book translate onto the screen, because then obviously the story gets a much wider distribution, because many more people watch films and see serials than read books.
Exactly. And what is your creative process when starting a new book? Does it differ now compared to when you wrote Q&A?
Well, it will differ now, because now I have much more time on my hand. Earlier, I had to defer to my day job, and I could only create in my spare time, which was on weekends. But now, every day is a weekend, so to speak, because I'm a retired diplomat. So that has changed, in the sense, the amount of time I have at my disposal. But what has not changed is my ideation process. And the way it works for me is, when an idea gets into my head, I start developing that idea in my head itself for months and months on end. Because once an idea first comes, then I have to say, okay, where will I take this idea to? Okay. It's a good story to set a novel based on a female character. Who this female character is going to be? What is her trajectory going to be? How will she go from A to B to C to Z? So I flesh out the entire trajectory of my character. Then I sit down and start doing my research. Once I have decided where she is going and what she is going to do, then I have to do the research, to provide an authentic backdrop. And once I have done all this, and this can take me sometimes as long as 8 or 9 months. That is when I actually sit down to write. And that is why most of the time, when I sit down to write, what gets published is generally my first draft, because the novel is already fully formed in my head and the research has already been done. So then I do not go through a process of, writing and tearing up the draft and creating a new draft and rewriting. It does not happen with me, because many people say that their draft which has been published is the 14th draft or the 15th draft.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we hear.
Yes, but for me, generally, it's the first draft, because, as I said, I have already done a lot of, the pre-writing work has already been done. So the novel comes fully formed.
Right. And how do you decide the social themes to weave into your stories?
So there also, I think it is really the topic of the day. My inspiration comes from everyday life in India. So what I have been seeing, reading in the newspapers, and then you decide, of course, there are 500 issues. You cannot talk about 500 issues, because then your book will become a, polemic. It will not be a novel at all. So you can only touch upon a limited amount of issues. And you decide that, first of all, the relevance of that issue and also the dramatic impact of that issue, because eventually you have to tailor it to the needs of your novel. What gives you the maximum dramatic impact in terms of the structure of your novel, then you pick and choose those.
Right. And do you feel pressure to match the global success of Q&A with your subsequent works?
You see, the problem is when your first book becomes an Oscar-winning film, you can only go downhill from there, because, you've already peaked too early. So I already knew that, look, even when I was writing my second book, Six Suspects, I knew that it would not be even half as successful as Q&A, for the simple reason that Q&A was a very safe book. You create a lovable character, you make the reader fall in love with that character and follow that character's journey. But for my second book, my publisher suggested that maybe we can write another book based on the same character, because, that character has become very loved all around the world. So maybe we can write another book with the same character. And I said, I don't want to be a Spider-Man franchise, where I'm just doing the same story again and again. So I wanted to test my own boundaries as a writer. And that's why I created this very challenging, multi-dimensional, polyphonic narrative called Six Suspects, where 6 different people are telling you their stories in their own unique voices. And even though I knew it would not be as successful as Q&A, for me, it was important that, can I do this as a writer? For me, that was important. And in a way, I could take those risks because I was already in a very proper day job. I was not dependent on writing for my bread and butter. So that's why I could take those risks. If I was a full-time writer and I was dependent on writing for my bread and butter, for the support of for supporting my family, then probably I would be much more risk averse, because then I would try to write what the market wants me to write rather than what I want to write.
Exactly. And how has your storytelling evolved over the years, both as a writer and as a person?
Well, generally, you would want to believe that you have evolved as a writer, as a person. As you mature, you probably have a much bigger database. You have much more life experiences that you can mine and things like that. But eventually, that's for the readers to judge whether every new novel is an advancement over the previous one or it is a regression. That is not something for me to comment upon. That's for the readers. But the good thing is, readers have related to all 4 of my novels. I have had a good reception. All 4 have been bestsellers. And that is what motivates me to continue creating stories. As long as I have stories to tell, and as long as I have readers who are really willing to read those stories, I will continue to write.
True. And are there any specific authors or genre that influence your writing style?
I have read many authors and read many genres across the years, because I got into reading at a very early age. Even when I was, I think, 4 or 5 years old, I had started really reading even advanced novels, so to speak.
Oh wow!
I was an early reader, because my grandfather had a magnificent library of 10,000 books, and he had not just he was a lawyer, so he did not have only legal books. He also had books by Franz Kafka and Albert Camus and writers like that. And he was the one really who encouraged me to get into the reading habit. And it was really thanks to him that I was able to, find my own voice as a writer, because only when you are a good reader can you be a good writer. There are many people today who want to write who have never read a large number of writers, and I always ask them, I said, if you have not read, how can you be a writer? Because only through reading you will understand what is good writing and what is bad writing, and you will be able to perfect your own voice, hone your own technique. But unless you know the techniques, how will you do that? So some of the writers that I have been influenced by in the past have included people like Paul Auster. I would say Haruki Murakami, even though he writes magical realism, which is not my cup of tea. But I admire the way he constructs his novel, at least the voice in which he writes those novels. Paul Auster, J.M. Coetzee also. I think Disgrace was a wonderful novel. And I like the laconic way in which he uses language, very short sentences, but able to carry a depth of meaning. So these are the kinds of books I like. Especially I'm fond of first-person narratives, strong first-person narratives, because then the voice is the most important thing. And if the voice gets you, then you are willing to follow that voice right till the end of the novel. So strong first-person narratives are the kinds of novels that I really want to dig my teeth into. But, those are very difficult novels also, because if the voice does not get you, then you give it up. Because if the voice does, supposing you're writing in the voice of a 9-year-old boy, and if somehow you start feeling that, no, this voice is too mature, a 9-year-old cannot be writing like this, then you will just give up.
Right. What do you think about, literary market in India? There are a lot of literary festivals that's been organized, and there's a lot of space for the new upcoming writers in India, isn't it?
Yes, I think India is one of those markets where I think reading is booming. In America, for instance, you have seen many of the book chains have closed down. And I do not know whether it is people are reading less or people are reading more on, e-books rather than physical books. I do not know what the reason for that is, but many bookstores, Borders, etc., they shut down in America. But in India, you are seeing new bookstores like Kunzum, etc., coming up. In every mall now, you will see at least 2 or 3 bookshops also, which is a very, very good development, I would say. So yes, and the second thing I would say is that now a lot of genres are flowering in India. We didn't used to have science fiction fantasy, for instance, 15 years ago. But now you have science fiction fantasy. You have a lot of the Rings kinds of, those kinds of books. You have teenage romance. You have young adult. So, all kinds of genres are now flowering in India. And you are seeing a lot of literary output coming out from a whole lot of young authors in particular. In fact, the reader is spoiled for choice because there are so many people who are writing now. When you go to a bookstore, you are just confronted with a bewildering array of books, and sometimes you have to ask yourself, which book should I pick up next?
Right. And any advice that you would like to give to aspiring writers who are juggling demanding careers and creative pursuits?
Yes, I always give 3 main advices. The first advice I give is that, look, you write only what only you can write. Do not try to copy someone else. Do not try to copy someone else's story. Write a story that only you can narrate. So that is the most important thing, that you have to write something unique, something different, something which makes you stand out. Because if you're writing a derivative thing, then your creativity is very marginal in there. You are just, experimenting with maybe a different voice, but the story is someone else's. So it should be your own unique story, number one. That's the first thing. The second thing is you have to sit down and you actually have to have the discipline to write, because I meet so many budding authors at literary festivals who say, I started my novel 2 years ago, but then I could not finish it. Because they did not have the discipline to see through that novel. Because, when you start a novel, there is a lot of enthusiasm. But as you get deeper into that novel, that same level of enthusiasm will never be there. That enthusiasm will definitely wane. You have to motivate yourself that, no, I have to write. And that's why I say, even if you write crap, write something, because you can always edit a badly written piece of writing, but you cannot edit a blank page. If there is nothing on that page, there is nothing to edit. But even if you have written something horrible, you can still maybe salvage 10% of that. Maybe 90% has to be written, but you can still do something, and at least you wrote. So the second thing is you have to have the discipline to sit down and write and complete this project. And the third and most important thing, you have to get it evaluated by a neutral person, somebody who does not have a vested interest in promoting you. Because many times, first-time writers think, oh, this has to win the next Booker Prize. But actually, when the English professor reads it, he says, sorry, this is not going to the Booker, this is going to the bin. So you have to get it evaluated by your peers, by people who will give you objective advice to know the worth of what you have created. Because sometimes, you are too attached to what you have written, and you really do not know whether what you have written is good or not so good. And only when you get this objective advice are you able to understand the true worth. And yes, if the advice says, no, this is great, then by all means, go ahead and try to market it, because these days, the old saying, any fool can write a book. It takes a genius to sell one. These days, 90% of a book's success is how you market it. Because even a very good book can just fall through the cracks and not be visible at all, and nobody reads it because, it just did not get the visibility. And even a bad book, just because, you placed it at the point of sale in a bookstore or whatever, you are able to create a buzz around it. So I think marketing is also a very, very important aspect of a book success these days.
Yeah. Because on that note, I really wish you a very good luck for your book, and we would like to see it translated into cinema pretty soon, and we wish you good luck for your literary career as well. And I'm very pleased that you had found some time to be a part of my platform. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on your platform, and once again, look forward to continuing our conversation if and when this book becomes a film.
Right. Thank you so much.